This is update for April 6, 2023, day 407 of the war, and of the date update, also obviously for catch up for April 5. So let me start first with strategic general updates, and then we're gonna do a quick walk through the front line. As a heads up for those who are just for the front line, there's not really much going on there. It's I would say partially frozen in general, at least from the Russian side. There is high expectation on the Russian side that there will be that Ukrainian offensive is coming soon. We'll see what happens there, and we'll discuss it once we get to the frontline update. But let's first start with what's going on in the world finances, in the world economic system. So this is the update that I've been doing for the past 4 weeks on the situation with the failure of the banks and just generally stress in the financial system in the US and actually a little bit in the world, because FX repo is really the indicator of the stress in the world. So as you can see, the stress is slowly going down. So if you add these numbers together, prime credit plus bank term funding program, I think it's just going down every week. For now, the stress is on a decline. It doesn't mean that the problem has been resolved. It's just in a way, the best way to describe it is kind of like when you it's like a disease, right? You have a temporary remission before new attack of the disease on the body. So this is something very similar. There is more commercial real estate coming up, like loans that where the actual physical assets are not performing. Basically, they don't have cash flow. So all of those loans that are commercial real estate, they're going to have a lot of problems. So this is going to be another blow for the banking system. We'll find out how it all plays out in probably a quarter or two. But for now, things are somewhat stable. Sort of no imminent sort of collapse. And even internationally, as you can see, the demand for US dollar has gone down to only 40 billion US dollars. Now let's discuss a little bit, as we always do, China. What's going on there? You've probably seen that French president and head of EU, European Union, went to China to basically convince Chinese president to put pressure on the Russian president to basically have a ceasefire in Ukraine. The trip was not successful. Obviously, China is not planning to do the hard work for someone else if they don't have interest in that, and so that just even it was very obvious. But Europe doesn't lose hope. The head of European foreign affairs, I don't know he's not the minister, commissar. Sounds very communistic, but that's what they use in the European Union. So Josep Borrell, he's gonna visit China next week. So basically, the first time didn't work out. Let's try the second time. I predict that it's not gonna work out either. China is pretty sad in terms of what they want to do, what they want to achieve. And just talk, as they say, is cheap, and it's not going to convince China to change anything. At the same time, there was very interesting, it was I think on the 5th, interesting interview of the Chinese ambassador to European Union, where basically he walked back most of what's been going on between Chinese president and Russian president when Chinese president visited Russia. At the same time, that also means that for Chinese diplomacy, it's not going to be hard to walk back what this ambassador said. So as you can see, I give you word, I take it back. There is no sort of honor system there. So the truth is that China is supportive of Russia, but they cannot do it openly because it may harm the economic situation in China, which is difficult. I would say very difficult, and so they don't want to have another blow coming from, let's say, European Union, because there is already very clear blow from the U.S. You've seen the headlines; both countries on very clear collision course. Whether it's going to lead to actually military collision remains to be seen. Hopefully, that's going to be somehow avoided, but hope is really not a strategy, as I say. Speaking of that, the U.S. side is leadership is trying to talk to Chinese side, and Chinese leadership is refusing to talk. Very, they again, talk is cheap, and for China, U.S. actions where they basically block export of semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China is louder than thousand words. On the same time, China is not sitting idle. They're actually developing lithography machines that they're not quite the same as ASML, but it allows them to be sort of close enough. And if they don't have the same level of quality, they can then let's say replicate similar results with quantity, with basically having more chips. So I don't know exact the dimensions. So like the most advanced ones are like 2, 3, 4 nanometers. That's what ASML does right now. Chinese are probably closer to 10. I don't know exactly, like probably 810, 6, 810. So it's not that far. It's fairly advanced. And so you can sort of basically produce 2 times more of the chips to achieve essentially the same result. In most applications, that's gonna actually work out. There is very small niches where you really need small, and it's not gonna work perfectly. But that is extremely limited sort of subset, and I don't think it's gonna be sort of like huge impediment for Chinese military development, first of all. Then actually, let's switch a little bit to Russia. So Russian economy or Russian financial system continues to be in a, I wouldn't say free fall in the full meaning of the word, but continuing to deteriorate as finances continue to deteriorate. So Russian ruble hit 81 rubles for $1. If you remember, like probably a week ago, it was like 77 or something like that. So you see the speed definitely going up and accelerating. Russian central bank has to sell FX reserves to support. So basically, without support, this exchange rate would be even sort of worse for Russia. So in a way, this is to extent sort of optical illusion, let's put it this way. Then related to this is the European Union trying to sort of clamp down on Russian export of crude oil, or sort of illegal or black market export, where basically there are 2 spots in the Mediterranean. One is in sort of Greek waters, my understanding, is near Kalamata, where there is basically the crude oil being shipped from one tanker to another one, and the other favorite spot is in Spanish waters near Ceuta. So basically, European Union trying to kind of push away, move, kind of scare away this ships from this spots, but it means that Russian side is actively looking for other spots where they're probably not going to be in territorial waters, and then they will continue sort of business as usual. So it's not going to sort of change tremendously Russian export of crude oil. As long as there is demand, there's always way to sort of supply it. It's in a way kind of similar to narcotics, right? So there's demand for those. There will be people will find ways how to sort of smuggle and deliver them to earn money. So the same, there's no difference with crude oil. Then also related to Russia, now a little bit switching to Saudi Arabia. So if you remember, Saudi Arabia is completely going in the sort of hugging China and now becoming sort of settling its disputes with Iran with the help of China. And in the process, Saudi Arabia started buying Russian intelligence equipment, so basically spying equipment. So it's switching from the US to Russia and Belarus. Actually, so this is actually not just Russia, Belarus, but if you remember, this is essentially one country with sort of two faces or two seats in the United Nations, and that's why they sort of still Belarus still exists, but the point is that Saudi Arabia, and it's probably going to be true for the rest of the Persian Gulf, they actively switching to this Russia-China alliance, and they basically technologically moving into that group. Also related to this, if you remember, you probably saw that Iran and Saudi Arabia opened the embassies. They signed an agreement that that sort of a sense of a truce in China and so on. So the things sort of continues. I have to say it's a big achievement for Chinese diplomacy, and in general a huge win, strategic win for China that significantly undermines West. At this also very sort of interesting how to say news is that Airbus is planning to build another production facility in China and to increase its output by 2 times in China, which is I would say it's truly amazing, given the whole situation that that the top at Airbus is so desperate that they don't see any other growth opportunities, that they literally going into the potential adversary and spend money there and invest money there. But again, there will be probably severe disappointment down the road for the company and shareholders of it. Then also related to Europe is Algeria. I guess that's probably correct in English. The country is actually it's not sort of widely spoken or discussed, but essentially that's also the country is part of this China-Russia alliance. As if I mentioned before that Algeria totally hooked up on Russian military equipment, so that's majority of its weapon systems are from Russia. So there's a little bit more news. So they are buying also military vessels from China. So as you can see, they completely in sort of firmly in the world of China and Russia. Related to Russia, so I think Russian Prime Minister went to Vietnam. And the result of that visit was that Vietnam stated that they're not supporting sanctions against Russia. And so, they will continue business as usual with Russia. Again, this, shows that there is a lot of countries in this world who don't really support sort of Western vision, and they want to continue in very different paths. Even though Vietnam have quite a bit of tension with China. They had even war in the past, where actually amazingly China lost. But nevertheless, China has some territorial problems with Vietnam. Now a little bit switching to energy and and Europe. So, as a result of all of this energy policies that are, as I mentioned before, they completely misguided, and essentially they are probably transitioning Europe back uh, to the medieval ages if they are really truly implemented. And I think before they will truly be implemented, the societies will collapse there. So that's not going to happen anyways. But nevertheless, this attempt to move to this alternative energy leads to the sort of related consequences. Norway said that they're not going to be building pipelines to Europe to supply more, to increase supply, because they don't see any point, because that that energy is not going to be needed very soon in Europe, because it's assumed that it's going to transition to just solar and wind, and everything is going to be happy. So as you can see, this is again creating more problems down the road, because under investments and there is a huge lead time for all of this energy investments, really means that could be a lot of pain energy wise in Europe, and that also means for the world, because this is one big market. The less crude oil or natural gas on the market in the world, the higher prices for everybody. Doesn't matter where you live. You live in Latin America, you live in Africa or India or Ukraine or even Russia. You pay more. By the way, in Russia, it's not that just for those who think that okay, Russian citizens, Russian people pay nothing for gasoline or diesel fuel or for natural gas. That actually the prices are fairly high relative to how cheap the production is, and so people don't really enjoy dirty cheap gasoline or diesel fuel like it could be in some countries in the Persian Gulf or used to be in North Africa. So now let's actually switch to Ukraine. So in Ukraine, there is a big scandal growing up. And essentially, the scandal has been started with the help of the Western intelligence agencies, and probably I would say it's probably with the help of the US intelligence agencies, where they showing evidence or they provided evidence showing that Ukrainian intelligence agency, or it's called SBU, or former KGB, so it's basically Russian equivalent, like Russia has FSB, but that they're all coming from KGB. So it's basically Russian KGB and then there's Ukrainian KGB. So basically, Ukrainian KGB has been run by the Russian KGB since arrival of the current Ukrainian president, since his election in 2019. He basically appointed Russian, agents to run Ukrainian KGB. And if you think that they're looking for any secrets, there's not that many secrets. What they were doing, they were really destroying this agency from within, and actually destroying more, like creating more political problems as well. So they try to squeeze people, like push out everyone who actually does good job, does the right things. They try to kind of like from within to push those people out, and they were pretty successful at that. But the more important sort of meaning of all of this is that it directly ties to current Ukrainian president. So because he is in charge, he directly appoints the head of it, and head of it exactly who was appointing those Russian agents, and there are a lot of allegations against him. So effectively, what it all means that Ukrainian president could not know what is going on and who is getting appointed and who he appointed. So it's all points as well that he is also works for Russia and effectively Russian agent. Doesn't mean that he does sort of like in a primitive way. It's I just want to explain, because many people will just saying like, oh well, He just says and does all of these wonderful speeches and everything. So the way it actually works, so he has some rhetoric, but his actions are actually opposite of that rhetoric, and everything, whatever has been done so far, is how to make things less possible for ordinary Ukrainians to continue sort of fight for independence, and that's a whole like approach of the intelligence agency. They don't directly do like visible harm. It's sort of kind of invisible. It's very how to say, and that's why it's very dangerous and very the level of the harm is extremely high as a result of that. And to add to this, the Ukrainian president, economic advisor, he's a member of the parliament. His last name is Hetmansev. He does the same thing in economic arena. Basically, he's basically pushing for more regulation, for higher taxes. The goal is to create economic desert. So because if country doesn't have good economy, then they cannot they cannot withstand, they cannot fight, and so on. So which is exactly what's happening. What happened to Ukraine. So this person is still and basically this person Hetmansev, he used to work as a left or right hand for one of those Russian KGB, how you call it, agents who were running Ukrainian KGB. So those agents, they are in Russia, so they have sort of mechanism how they run it through different agents. But basically, one of them used to live in Ukraine and then left, fled to Russia a while ago, and so he used to work for him. So as you can imagine, in all of this, in that world, there's never sort of former sort of relationship. It's like once you are in the intelligence agency, you basically die in intelligence agency. You never sort of leave that world. And so as you can imagine, this person is doing everything to undermine Ukrainian economy from the very beginning. So this is the sort of nature of the sort of developing scandal. I believe it will be sort of, how to say, extinguished by Ukrainian president by just basically ignoring it. The West is going to sort of ignore it as well. The reason it's probably been sort of started and released is to have more leverage against Ukrainian president from the West. So essentially, it doesn't mean that he's, this is what I'm trying to explain is just motivation why this is happening and why it's happening right now. From Ukrainian perspective, it's very clear, it's very obvious that Ukrainian president, and people been saying this for a while, that he's essentially another Yanukovych. And for those who don't know, Yanukovych was the Ukrainian president who was actually elected by Ukrainian people, and he was puppet of the Russian KGB. And he fled in 2014 as a result of sort of popular uprising. So this one is the same, the current Ukrainian president, except he's much, much more intelligent, much, much more likable. He knows how to talk to people. So in this way, he is extremely much more dangerous than the previous one. Now let's actually switch to the walk through the front line. We're going to do it in a clockwise fashion, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border remains very tense. There are all sort of actions, even attacks of the commanders, infiltration to the Russian territory from Ukrainian. Kind of like, for now, it's more happening from Ukrainian territory to the Russia. Russian side is not as active in that area, but they more active at basically shelling Ukrainian villages near the border. Now let's as a general want to say is that as is just strategically on the about the military situation is it does feel that situation is kind of like a freezing from both sides. Both sides are exhausted, don't have enough resources to continue high intensity warfare. That's just general takeaway. Ukrainian side apparently still plans to do this offensive, but that's just going to be effectively last hurrah because there's simply not enough resources to do the second attempt, the third attempt. And for Russia, it's going to be very critical if they manage to sort of withstand that attack, then the situation probably will turn into this call it frozen conflict, or basically what it used to be since 14 till 2022. Something very similar, let's put this way. I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same, but something very similar. If this offensive fails, basically, because Ukraine will not get more resources from the West. Current Ukrainian top is not, as I said, it's essentially Russian agent running Ukraine, and he has no desire to develop internal resources or ability to continue fight without external support. So speaking, to support what I just said is essentially, if you look at the North Lugansk front line, essentially it's quiet. There's not much going on here. There's obviously always artillery fire exchange. There is some reconnaissance action, but at large it's quiet. Now let's jump to North Donbass front line. Things here are essentially unchanged. One change is that Wagner mercenaries try shifting a little bit where they put pressure on Ukrainian forces. They decided to renew their attacks on the flank here, on the northern flank. Remains to be seen if they're going to be any successful, but so far this is the situation essentially hasn't changed since whatever, probably 20th, where, as I said, roughly the front line is going somewhere around this railroad line, and Wagner mercenaries are super slowly squeezing Ukrainian troops, obviously suffering heavy losses. Ukrainian side suffers heavy losses as well. So it's a total meat grinder, super slow. It's maybe like, one building per day type of move. And so it's going to take a while for Wagner mercenaries to fully squeeze Ukrainian troops out of the town, unless Ukrainian command decides to pull them out. This is just a kind of like refresher of how things were developing here near Bahmut. So again, the same, just repeat the same, is there's renewed focus on the northern flank, probably the result of realization on the Russian side that all of this frontal attacks in the Bahmut street fighting leads to extremely heavy losses, and this really means that there is high probably chance that Russian troops will not be even able to squeeze Ukrainian troops from the western outskirts of Bahmut. So they decided to try their luck by creating more credible threat of encirclement in the hope that Ukrainian command will pull troops from the western Bahmut. Remains to be seen if that's going to work out, because, as I said before, Russian side is extremely exhausted, and it's essentially, as I said, last hurrah. They pushing they throwing last last resources that they have to kind of to push it to the finish line, and it's still unclear that they will be able to do that. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here are also kind of, I wouldn't say frozen, but they fairly limited. As before, it's Now it's Marinka, which you can any day there is always Russian attack there. Then this Pisky salient, and now we have also added this area north of Avdiivka. But at the same time, all of those attacks are fairly limited and not strong. And this is the update from Avdiivka. Well, really, update is there is no update, no changes. So essentially, front line frozen here since March 24. I'm not gonna even jump to the Zaporizhya front line. It's all quiet there. There's no really nothing is going on there. As I said before, that's probably could be the area where Ukrainian side uh, can and should try its luck with this one-shot offensive, because it's really can collapse the whole Russian sort of defensive position in general in Ukraine, and create a big opportunity for Ukrainian side. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.